if we think it's hard for Black Latino people to become an accredited investor, it is that hard for white women as well. So it has been a pathway to bypass that system and be able to create the economic wealth. So I am all about equity. And even, recently, we know that there's a whole divide between Black men and, Black women and Latino men versus Latinx women. I tell people don't get distracted by that, because it is a way to just distract us, because, you know, the enemy is inequity. The enemy is racism. It's a system. It's a system that we have to dismantle. And when we start focusing on, well, why did Latino men vote like this? Why did Black men vote like this? None of that changes inequity, right? We need to stay focused on how do we create a new financial system that is open and accessible to everyone, right? Because the more options individuals have, the more inclusive money becomes, right? The more we leverage technologies like blockchain, right, the more people can participate. When you look at COVID and the stimulus checks, right, and even the vaccines, the people who couldn't participate were the ones who didn't have digital identity, right, who weren't mobile, right, who couldn't participate, and some of them did have means, right. So we have a lot of technology. Like, one of the things we don't talk enough about is blockchain technology for identity management. Right now, we know that in the medical space, it is HIPAA compliant to put patient data on blockchain technology, right? So what are some of the things that we can do? Because when you look at AML and KYC, the federal government has tried to fix money laundering on the backs of poor people. The only people who can't KYC are poor people, right? Let's be honest. Criminals know how to get around KYC. So you're creating an additional burden.
Welcome to the Bitcoin Source, your essential place for all things Bitcoin. I'm Dawdu, per usual, here for your thought-provoking session. Today, we're thrilled to have with us Cleve Mesidor, an influential figure in the cryptocurrency and blockchain world. Cleve is the executive director of the Blockchain Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit that is leading an industry-wide crypto campaign. She is also a former senior staffer on Capitol Hill and a public policy advisor for the Blockchain Association. Cleve, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for the conversation, and the timing could not be any better.
Yes. So, Cleve, let's start taking it back to the beginning. So, you grew up in Haiti, a country with a rich history, but also some significant challenges. How did your experiences growing up there shape your worldview and ultimately your path to crypto?
Yeah, I was born in Haiti. My family left when I was 8 years old, and we migrated to New York City. So I actually grew up in New York City at the height of the hip hop era. I actually lived on Hollis, Queens, and actually would go on the avenue. So we would actually see Run DMC around the way all the time, and LL Cool J. But it was an interesting time, to grow up in the US coming from Haiti. And, I like to tell people that, hip hop birthed me. Being Haitian comes with a political badge of honor. I remember family members always yelling during holidays about politics in Haiti. So it's no wonder that politics became part of my, ethos or core values. But yeah, a lot of people say that, Haiti has its challenges. I don't believe that. I actually believe the international community has challenges with Haiti and has imposed these everything from sanctions to, rules that do not make sense. You know, I think Haiti's biggest issue is geography, right? Haiti's issue is geography, making it prone to so many natural disasters. That is real. But when it comes to the economic status, it is because the international community has been exploiting my homeland and under the guise of humanitarian support. But, as a Haitian American, as a descendant of Louverture, Dessalines, Christophe, we freedom is our most cherished legacy, and we fight for it everywhere we go. And, that fight doesn't stop.
Yes, I grew up with a lot of Haitians just coming from and growing up in Boston. There's a huge Haitian population there.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I definitely can relate, and I definitely can commend you on some of the experiences that you had growing up in Haiti, and that kind of transitioning into your experiences, and also inspiring you to have this alternative form of approaching kind of, the advocacy movements that we see you doing today. So I appreciate that, please.
Yeah, no, thank you. And, you know, advocacy has always been in my blood, as I shared. Grew up in New York City. When I went to college, studied, not politics, but social issues, and then went into politics. I served in the Obama administration. I worked in Congress, but eventually I became disillusioned with politics. The one thing I'll say about serving in the Obama administration, if we couldn't do it under the first black male president, we were never going to do it through the political system. Interestingly, it was during the Obama administration in 2013 that I first learned about Bitcoin. In 2013, a friend, Sinclair Skinner, actually had a Bitcoin project, and he reached out and asked me to help with a press release. And I helped with the press release. All of a sudden, I was like, what is this Bitcoin thing? But it was everywhere after I read the press release. And that was 2013. And 2015, the movie Dope came out, and I was just like, oh, I get it now. And went down that rabbit hole. In 2016, I decided to leave politics and move back to New York and work in crypto full time. And here I am, almost 7 years later. Here this space is about 16 years later. It is about economic revolution. The things that I didn't think I could achieve within politics, Washington's politics specifically, I saw the avenues here. People say that, Bitcoin is financial freedom, but I would say the technology as well as the asset class are freedom, because they are tools to solve long-standing problems. And, we hear a lot from the crypto bulls about their Lambos, and everybody's just like, oh, this is a get-rich scheme. But you know what? For people of color, especially Black, Latino, Indigenous communities, the largest segments of this sector, it was never about that for us. Let's be honest, right? Those of us who bought Bitcoin early made money on it. What did we use that money for? To help our families out of foreclosure, to pay off our student loans and our siblings' student loans, right? To actually get out of debt ourselves. And let's be honest, if you made $1 million in Bitcoin, by the time you did all that, you have nothing left. But we didn't go into this for that, right? We went into it because we've always looked to alternatives. The financial system never worked for us. We were never able to fully participate. So we're used to finding complicating mechanisms to get it done. And so I joke with people that for Black, Indigenous, Latinx folks, when we saw this, it was like, oh, we already do this. Like these processes were. I like to joke with people that, if a layperson wants to understand Bitcoin or cryptocurrency or even blockchain, I tell them, think of avocado toast, right? For most people in the world, whether it's, Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, or even Asia, if you're poor, you can bake bread in the yard, and you can actually, grow avocados. So avocado toast is a staple of people with meager means. Somehow the West has translated that infrastructure into $50 avocado toast, right? But if you think of it like avocado toast, the infrastructure was really already there, right? Easy to do. It's private. It's not digital. It was something that was scalable for those who could participate in the financial system. So when you look at the approaches, the strategies, the infrastructure, it is taking the tactics that people, who could not participate, were locked out, were doing, that provided privacy, that provided that level of autonomy and economic freedom that I'm one of those people who believes that there were multiple authors of the Bitcoin white paper. It's an economics paper. And when you look at, the way it's framed, it was looking to solve a problem. It's not the problem that we're actually using, the technology or the currency for, but it was looking for an alternative, right? It was looking for what is the avocado toast that we can use to actually tackle some of these problems. Because as you know, if you read the white paper, it's all about solutions. It's all about identifying gaps or issues within our financial system, or even, the way we transact broadly, and identifying some very basic solutions and tools.
For sure. And I definitely want to drive home a point that you mentioned where, kind of demystifying like blockchain technology from crypto. And I think a lot of people from our community have like a confusion there. So I'm curious to know, like, when you're speaking to people outside of the crypto space, how do you address those people that are just solely curious about blockchain?
Well, I want to talk to the crypto native space right now, right? People like you and I, people within our networks. The rest of the world does not care, right? For them, it's all Bitcoin, right? For them, they have no concept of what's the difference between a token and, cryptocurrency. Oh, please don't even talk about permission and permissionless, right? So we can't let the vernacular or the technical, aspects of this get in the way of commercial adoption, right? And oftentimes when we do that, when we use terminology to somehow, shame people, it's usually the marginalized people who get pushed out, right? It is, do you understand the difference between Bitcoin and blockchain? I will tell you, I spend my time, as you said, demystifying the language of crypto. I talk about the avocado toast before I can talk about, and rarely talk about the white paper, right? Because just like when Sinclair in 2013 asked me to write a press release, and Bitcoin was a part of the press release, and I had to learn about it, he didn't say, do you know about, this white paper, whatever. I did the research. It piqued my interest, and then I went down the rabbit hole, right? So we have to understand that people will find their way. We just have to pique their interest. We just have to normalize the language of crypto, because at the end of the day, it is just about a new technology that solves problems. And if we approach it that way, regardless of who that person is, once they say, okay, let me look at this for myself, they're going to go down that rabbit hole. And you remember, we would spend nights up trying to figure out, wait, there are different types of blockchains? Oh my God. Remember when tokens came into play? I was just like, okay, y'all need to stop, because I'm just getting this piece. Oh my God. Then stable coins. It was like, oh my God. Okay, y'all stop it. So the rabbit hole is there for whoever, gets their interest piqued. For us, the difference between blockchain and cryptocurrency are important. But I tell people that, when you look at blockchain technology, I think of it as electricity, right? And I think of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, like light, right? So electricity powers light, and you could have so many beautiful lights, bright lights, ELD lights. So blockchain is the electricity that powers the various cryptocurrencies. And if you think of all of the things we do with electricity beyond light, that's what we need to get people to, right? We need to get them to say, yeah, the light is beautiful and it will always be there. But imagine all things we do with electricity beyond that. But let's be honest, whatever you actually put on a blockchain, you can tokenize and monetize. You can just choose not to. So once a person is curious, they will be forced. I tell people, friends who are accountants, right? Just focus on how is this technology disrupting accounting? How is it disrupting your practices? Same thing with nurses. I tell them, focus on how healthcare is being transformed. Focus on digital identity. If people just focus on how their space is being impacted, they're going to get to the difference between, blockchain and cryptocurrency. They're going to get to eventually the difference between all of the cryptocurrencies. We have to be clear that we are at the future frontier. We went from Bitcoin to now we have thousands of cryptocurrencies, and it is the future frontier. And we are in a beta mode where we're testing use cases, and that's a good thing. But let's not pretend, we have a window into the future of what this space will look like, because the group that identified themselves as Satoshi Nakamoto, the Satoshi group that essentially wanted to create a cashless payment system, would have never predicted that this is how the space would have evolved, right? So we have to be nimble, and we have to create space for new generations of innovators to come and really commercialize this space. I'm a Gen Xer, and I feel like Gen Xers, we can claim that we helped to create this space. But I do think the people who will really create a commercial infrastructure beyond the current $2 trillion market, they're Gen A, and Gen Alpha is under 13, and they're Gen Z, and they just got out of college, and some of them are still in college, right? But just like we've been digitizing money for a long time, this solution will evolve and continue to be transformative unless allow it to do that.
Well said, well said. And what I really love about what you're doing in particular, like there's a lot of powerhouse women in this space. You have Tavania Evans, you have Fancy Five, you have Naja Roberts, you have all these different powerhouse women in the space, and you're a very outspoken advocate for diversity and inclusion within finance and tech spaces. Do you believe crypto specifically is a key tool for promoting equity in the finance space?
Yes, yes. And why is it a key tool for equity? Because of the diminished barriers of entry, because it is accessible to everyone. And that everyone means people in rural communities. It means men and women. It means felons. It means, people who are disabled and homebound, right? The great thing about whether it's the technology or the currency, you can access it, you can build on it. It is accessible to everyone. And let's be clear, there are a lot of people within the crypto native space that are trying to make it a closed system. But, that is the beauty of it. And for communities that have been historically locked out of finance, Black, Indigenous, you know, like I want to, give props to the API community broadly that are a big part of this ecosystem. And I don't, speak about the API community as much as Black and Latino, because I do think that, Black, Latino, Indigenous communities have been so outside of the locked out, locked outside of the financial system. But I do think that the API community broadly, which is so diverse and so vibrant, inequity plays out differently in different communities, and we've all had to grapple with it, and we're all trying to figure out how can we make our communities better, how can we improve the quality of life for our neighbors, for our friends, for our family members. And I think that's what blockchain and cryptocurrency offers. Even when you look at, I focus a lot on women in the crypto space. And, when you look at white women and how they've really looked at it to look at economic prosperity, and when I engage with white women who are focused on equity, and a lot of them, do have had access to participate in the financial system, but the gender divide has been real for them, because we know the financial system has always been primarily male and primarily tech. So this is an access point. And even becoming an accredited investor, if we think it's hard for Black, Latino people to become an accredited investor, it is that hard for white women as well. So it has been a pathway to bypass that system and be able to create the economic wealth. So I am all about equity. And even, recently, we know that there's a whole divide between Black men and, Black women, and Latino men versus Latinx women. I tell people, don't get distracted by that, because it is a way to just distract us, because, the enemy is inequity. The enemy is racism. It's a system. It's a system that we have to dismantle. And when we start focusing on, well, why did Latino men vote like this? Why did Black men vote like this? None of that changes inequity, right? We need to stay focused on how do we create a new financial system that is open and accessible to everyone, right? Because the more options individuals have, the more inclusive money becomes, right? The more we leverage technologies like blockchain, right, the more people can participate. When you look at COVID and the stimulus checks, right, and even the vaccines, the people who couldn't participate were the ones who didn't have digital identity, right, who weren't mobile, right, who couldn't participate, and some of them did have means, right. So we have a lot of technology. Like, one of the things we don't talk enough about is blockchain technology for identity management. Right now, we know that in the medical space, it is HIPAA compliant to put patient data on blockchain technology, right? So what are some of the things that we can do? Because when you look at AML and KYC, the federal government has tried to fix money laundering on the backs of poor people. The only people who can't KYC are poor people, right? Let's be honest. Criminals know how to get around KYC. So you're creating an additional burden. There was a case where the state of California, where residents get pensions, and so they actually wanted to expand the participation in the pension system. And so they looked at what is, some of those working class people, some of those McDonald's workers, like, they've worked a long time. And what if we can actually do some data mining, find, their work history, and create a new category for pensions that they could qualify for, right? That's economic security in the long term. And they identified these working class people who could actually finally get a pension, right? It won't be big, but it would be that economic security. And do you know there was, I forget the data, a significant portion of them, I think it's like a third or even a half of people could not KYC because you are entitled, you are eligible, but you just don't have that driver's license. That makes no sense. So there are so many problems we should be solving when it comes to inequity, and we need to focus on the system because that is what the white paper was about, right? It is how do we solve the problem of double spend, right? So how do we solve issues like identity, right? Making sure that people not before we even get to people monetizing their identity, we need to make sure, in communities of color, in rural communities, in communities where people are differently abled, how are we solving some of those problems for them?
Yes, I have to agree with that, Cleve. It's just insane. Like, I had an expired driver's license, and it kind of locked me out of doing anything until I got that renewed. So I definitely understand the plight that a lot of people face if they don't have a computer, they don't have access to the internet, they don't have a way to update their real ID or their digital IDs. That makes 100% sense. And on that front, I want to talk about something that you actually recently wrote in Forbes, where this recent election, we saw a surprising number of candidates supporting crypto within the race. What do you think that this means for the future of crypto regulation in the U.S.?
Yeah. Well, the one thing about the election, at least down ballot, we're not talking about the presidency, down ballot, when you look at the pro-crypto candidates, the crypto-friendly candidates that actually are out there, that actually, as they campaign, they put blockchain cryptocurrency on their campaign agenda and openly talked about how they want to leverage the benefits of it. The majority of that group were people of color. They were from the API community, from the Black community, from the Latino community, from the indigenous community. So what we know continues to bear out, right? Because the data shows the data we have shows that the earliest and largest adopters of cryptocurrency are communities of color, the working class, and they continue to be the largest segments of this space. And as we learned over the last few months, the crypto voter was also urban and diverse and young. And now we're seeing, as we look to elect people who are going to be friendly to crypto, who are going to advance a framework where we can get the clarity that we want, those people are going to be diverse as well. I say that to say, regardless of what you hear out there, inclusion is still a priority because when it comes to crypto, right, as we're seeing these candidates, and I point out in Forbes, at least the members that were actually called on election night, Shamari Figures from Alabama, a great supporter. And even Don Davis from North Carolina was actually in a very contentious race for his seat. So we have so many members of Congress coming in, women, men, communities of color. We have to make sure that this conversation about financial inclusion does not get eclipsed because we need those people who come from these communities. Yeah, promote crypto. Yes, let's get rid of Gensler. But first and foremost, I need to make sure you're committed to inclusion. I need to make sure that you're going to listen to communities of color, leaders of color, industry participants who are from communities of color. We know big crypto now exists. There are these PACs that, there are people who can drop out $25 million and say, okay, we claim we won this election. We know this election was won by people like you and me who actually gave $100 to these campaigns, who knocked on doors, but also who sought to educate our communities. We're the ones going into communities that nobody cared about and talk about why this is important. And for a lot of the candidates, they were hearing from people in their communities. And that's not being done by, wealthy executives. That's being done by everyday people. So the incoming Congress, the 100 Congress, at least the crypto Congress, those new members, and even the returning members, I mentioned Don Davis. There's also Stephen Hosford, the current CBC chair, who's going out. There's also, we know that, Jasmine Crockett, is a big crypto supporter. Angela Alsabrook coming in from Maryland. Also the Congresswoman from Delaware, who's now the Lisa Blunt Rochester, who's now a U.S. Senator. We're going to have 2 Black female senators in Congress. We haven't been able to do much in the Senate. We haven't been able to do much in the Senate because Elizabeth Warren declared war. But also, Sherrod Brown, a senator who lost, who was a great Democrat, who has done a lot, but Black crypto. I don't think he was against crypto, but he was always a barrier. And he's been replaced by a Latino, God, his last name is Moreno. I almost blanking on his name. And so we are now going to have people in the Senate that can say, yes, Senator Warren, we hear you, but we have a voice too in the Senate, and we see the benefits here, and we need to go beyond your dark arguments, because you spent years making these dark arguments, and we heard you, right? Now we have to move forward in a very constructive manner. So, it's a win-win for everyone, because we're at a point where we need to advance regulatory clarity, and people should know the people who need regulatory clarity the most are diverse leaders in crypto, diverse founders, diverse, entrepreneurs, because we're looking at market structure legislation right now. What does that mean? It's a fancy word to say that we're looking at what are the rules of the road, right? Market structure legislation in Congress right now, we have the FIT 21 bill. We're going to have, a Senate bill that's in development. Market structure says, okay, let's decide which ones are securities and which ones are commodities, because that will tell us if the CFTC has oversight, or if the SEC has oversight. And it will also determine the role of CFPB, OCC, and others as well. Let's determine that, right? But also, let's determine what are disclosure measures, right? Because we know, disclosures are important, and we're going to need to figure out what disclosure measures are appropriate where, and that's important for market participants, right? And then we're going to have to figure out what are the compliance measures, right? We know that the crypto industry is not the same as the banking industry or the fintech industry, right? So what are some of those compliance measures? So the one thing I would say is, right now, the 2 bills in both chambers are being considered, or Senate is still in development. None of them talk about inclusion. And for me, inclusion is not about diversity. Inclusion is about size. Because the way they're looking at market structure right now, it's a one-size-fits-all proposition. Which means if you're not, the big corporations like your Krakens, like your, Geminis, or, all of these big companies, like similar to what happened in the bit license in New York City. If you're not big and you don't have an army of attorneys and securities lawyers, you're not going to get a bit license. We can't let market structure be determined that way. It can't be a one-size-fits-all, because one-size-fits-all means only the wealthy get to be market leaders. So market structure here has to look at what are the thresholds for startups, micro enterprises, right? We know that, when you look at, Forecaster, Dan Romero, right? He created Forecaster, and because he got investment, it was able to really scale and be on track at some point to even become a unicorn. So access to capital is important, but we also need to make sure that the federal government is looking at regulatory measures that micro enterprises, whether you be a small startup or an entrepreneur or a small business, that we can comply and compete. We need to create a market where the little guys can become market leaders and can compete with big players. And that requires having a tiered approach, right? For large, medium, and small. And that makes sense. And for legislators, that's harder, right? But that's what government is, right? Stop trying to put things in a cookie cutter manner. And we're going to need data. We're going to need more data on startups across the crypto ecosystem to figure out what does a small startup look like, right? Is a small startup, somebody who's raised $20 million, or is it somebody who's raised $1 million, right? Are they in Series A or Series B or pre-seed? And we want to make sure they can comply, but if compliance means that you need to have an army of attorneys, you could raise $10 million. If that's going to attorneys, then you're not going to be effective as a startup. So we need that data, and we can get that data from accelerators, from a lot of the impact funds, even some of the VCs. When you look at blockchain capital or even Paradigm that actually funds startups, we don't need the information on the startups they funded. We need the information on the startups that they didn't fund. Right? We need the data on not why they didn't fund them, but what were their size, right? How much had they raised before, right? Because that's going to be one of the barriers they tell us, oh, we can't do a tiered approach to compliance because we don't have the data, right? Stop using data against us. So we can get that data quickly, but we need to make sure as we're looking at compliance, right, that everybody should be able to compete and comply, whether you're small, medium, or large. We can't have a one-size-fits-all like the BIT license. The BIT license has been in place since 2015, and I think only like less than 40 companies have gotten a license. That's how hard it is. We don't need lighter compliance measures, right? When you create compliance measures that are so stringent that you need an army of attorneys, then you know what? You're just like you did with KYC and AML, you're solving our problems on the backs of the people who want to participate. Small business and entrepreneurship is the engine of America's economy. Then market structure is our opportunity to have a conversation and demand that smaller players, micro enterprises, small entities can also become market leaders, can also get a money transfer license, can also get some of the considerations, even though they're not the size of, a Kraken or a Uniswap or the like.
Yes, and Cleve, you said something very profound in your report where you said that the Blockchain Foundation poses as the nerve center for crypto adoption. And as the executive director of the Blockchain Foundation, you're at the forefront of this industry-wide crypto education. Could you tell us about the foundation's mission and how you're driving adoption through education?
Yeah, so early in my career, I started working with Kristen Smith at the Blockchain Association, and we did a lot together on inclusion. But during COVID in 2021, we recognized that there was a gap, right? For those people who don't understand Washington, people always focus on who the president is, who the regulators are, and who members of Congress are, right? And try to influence them. Well, you can try that, but those groups, there's the stakeholder base that they listen to, and those are public institutions, advocacy groups, and we didn't have really a mechanism to reach them. And let's look at public institutions and advocacy groups. They can't really partner with industry, right? They can more easily partner with another nonprofit or an organization whose goal is not for profit, that is not trying to generate revenue, that is not trying to sell something. And so luckily in 2018, when they created the Blockchain Association, which is the C6, they had already created the C3, which is the Blockchain Foundation. Kristen asked me to lead it as the executive director. And for the last 2.5 years, since I believe February of 2022, we launched the foundation to be a bridge to public institutions. We partner with organizations like Aspen Institute, like Consumer Reports. Like we partnered with the New York City small business agencies. These public institutions that want to partner with an organization that is focused on education, that is solely focused on increased access, that is not creating products and services to sell. And then the great thing about the foundation is, we have a unique relationship with the Blockchain Association that represents over 100 companies. So when we're engaging with these public institutions and they want, they need somebody who's, they need a speaker, or they need expertise around Bitcoin or on stable coins, right? Or around, NFTs. There's an army of member companies at the Blockchain Association that I can tap and say, hey, can we do some matchmaking here? This organization needs to understand this. And so we know a lot of our companies, whether big or small, are head down building, right? Are really focused on getting to market, building new products. And the foundation, we've really been able to be that bridge. We just did a project with Hedera. A lot of people don't know Hedera, but Hedera focuses on, you know what? Hedera is sort of like the AWS of crypto. People build things on Hedera. When you look at, Carmel Cadet, who built MTech, she built on Hedera. So, last year Hedera reached out because they wanted to actually do an education campaign. They wanted to do a series of briefings. And I said, okay, great. Why don't we partner with the Congressional Financial Literacy and Wealth Creation Caucus that is bipartisan, led by Congresswoman Yoon Kim and Congresswoman Joyce Beatty? And why don't we take this conversation outside of Washington, right? Why don't we go into congressional districts and let's have a conversation that's not about Hedera, that's not about how great crypto is, that is just about education. And Hedera was fine with that. We didn't sit there talking about the Hedera protocol or why Hedera is great. We did talk about some of the projects that are built on Hedera. One of them is a platform that is led by, in its leadership, is a former CEO of a credit union. And they're actually building, infrastructure for credit unions that once they have the compliance to actually, offer digital assets and be able to participate more into that space, the infrastructure will be there. Many people don't know that within the banking space, core providers run stuff. They determine your infrastructure, and they really don't focus that much. They don't go, in my opinion, they don't give quality service to minority banks, community banks, or credit unions. So you had a project, right, that was actually building on Hedera to create resources for them. For the Hedera project, we did a series of briefings. We went into Boston, we went into Anaheim, California, went into Columbus. We had briefings and we partnered with local public institutions, and we had just a blockchain 101. And where there was a large entrepreneurship, we talked about the opportunities, for entrepreneurs and answered questions about how entrepreneurs are leveraging it. The cost of doing business is high. Creating a merchant account, right? How stable coins, can offset that whole fluctuation of the price of Bitcoin or Ethereum going up and down. One of the briefings we did in Anaheim, there was a guy who owned a gas station, and he came and he asked the question. He said, he's owned his gas station, but he wanted to see what tools are in this blockchain cryptocurrency space that he could use beyond just buying, cryptocurrencies. And it was great. And we talked to him about, again, everything from a merchant account to some of the optimization and efficiency in terms of tracking and supply chain and value chain management. So, the foundation is really a tool. We haven't tried to grow this big entity. It's really myself and a few, an admin and a researcher. And the goal is more to be a bridge and a connector. We do research papers. Our first research paper last year was on financial literacy in K-12 schools. We made the case that we do need to codify and standardize, financial education across all 50 states in all schools, right? But digital assets has to be a part of that conversation. And we made the case for why. If you're 18, you get to college on day one, you can open 5 credit cards and go to debt. Right. And right now we know, YouTube is the only place. Why not arm young people in high school or even earlier with financial education? And one of the things we addressed in our paper was the fact that we know teachers are not up on digital assets, right? They maybe will teach you how to balance a checkbook, but that shouldn't stop us. And one of our recommendations was that we can train teachers at community colleges over the summers, and they can get credits or accreditation from it. And that actually will give them a pathway, because we know teachers during the summers have to get part-time jobs. And so we would be educating teachers through community colleges to teach financial literacy that includes digital asset at the high school level, but also giving them a new skill and opening up a whole new industry for them. None of this is easy, but it is worth the work that government at all levels has to do to actually create a better world for everyone.
Yeah, I love that, Cleve. As someone who's been profiled by major outlets like CNBC, NPR, and the Washington Post, what message do you want to communicate about the future of crypto to this audience?
Yes, one of the things I loved the most was being on NPR. I was on NPR's Morning Edition, and I'm a communications geek. I was just like, oh my God, that was amazing. But everywhere I go, the one thing I try to tell people is crypto's not that sexy. It is not that. It's all about efficiency and optimization, right? And so right now we created this very sexy, very like weird, futuristic, unaccessible space. But let's be honest, blockchain cryptocurrency are just about efficiency and optimization. The white paper you printed is 7 pages. It's an economics paper, So my message is always that we have to make the language of crypto simple. We have to be honest about what this is. This is a technology that is a tool to solve problems. You don't have to learn blockchain to launch a blockchain initiative, because Dawn Dixon is a great example. Many of your listeners may know her. She's the founder of Popcom. Popcom, she sought to innovate vending machines by adding things like cannabis and Louis Vuitton bags in vending machine. But when you add things like cannabis, those are federally regulated products, and you have to verify identity. So Dawn Dixon was not a crypto founder. She was a serial entrepreneur who was always creating something. And for Popcorn, their thing was, okay, if we have to verify identity, how can we do it securely in a vending machine? Their team looked at the options, and they found that blockchain was great for identity management. So Popcom started using blockchain just for identity management. So I try to tell people it's not that sexy and it's not that mystical. Right? All it is, do what you're doing. Don't stop. Whatever you're doing, it works. But you may have a problem that you need a solution to. There may be an issue that you haven't been able to fix. And across the technology, we may have a solution to solve it. So just focus on that solution. And so that is where it is not that sexy. I don't have to go learn blockchain and go take a course, so now I could actually launch a company. You already have a company if you're an entrepreneur. You're an e-commerce business. Focus on just that. And the most basic thing people can do is create a merchant account to start accepting cryptocurrency, right? We know you can do that if you're a nonprofit. But, for most people, the process, whether you're a nonprofit or an e-commerce business or for-profit business, of creating a merchant account will actually give you a window into this process, right? And you'll learn it is the same process as having to do anything that requires, some infrastructure. For me, again, it's really, we need to tell people it's not that sexy. We need to tell people that it is about optimization and efficiency. It's about solutions. One of the things that I loved a few years ago, as you know, Chris Palmer does the DC FinTech Week every year. I think during COVID, I think it was 2021. He had the head of the Central Bank of Kenya, because Kenya had created M-Pesa, and M-Pesa is just such a great example of a digital currency, even though it's not cryptocurrency, but a digital currency that worked. And because of M-Pesa, we then had UPI in India and PIX in Brazil. what they're doing with in Brazil right now is just amazing. But Chris interviewed the head of the central bank of Kenya, and he asked the head of the central bank, "What do you think of blockchain? What do you think of cryptocurrency?" And the head of the central bank said, "My God, it's great technology. It's wonderful. I think innovation is great." But what he said struck me. He said, "But I think blockchain is a solution looking for a problem to solve." And that's because so many people see us talk about, the asset class. That to them seems like you're just trying to gain institutional clients, compete with Wall Street. That is not new, right? When he said blockchain is a technology looking for a problem to solve, we know that we're not talking enough about the problems that we can solve because they're not sexy, right? But there are tons of problems we're going to solve. And a lot of those problems are not, those solves are not going to be profitable. You're not going to be able to monetize them, right? Creating digital identity and ensuring, secure and safe, digital identity for poor people, please, right? You're probably going to get a government subsidy to do that. The best case scenario is like for a federal contractor like Lockheed Martin to actually make money by tracking into other federal contracts. But the solutions matter, and that goes back to the equity. Most of us came to this space not because we thought we could get rich. Let's be honest. The first time Bitcoin was worth $1 was in 2011, and in 2017, in December 2017, when it peaked its head at $20,000, it went down to $5,000 in a minute. We don't know enough about the speculative nature of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. We don't have enough runway to really do an assessment, because in financial services, you look at the last 5 years, last 10 years, 15 years, we don't have that, right? But we do know that in the past, until institutional players started operating, that Bitcoin was a currency that when there was too much speculation, it would actually, we'd go into a bear market, right? But it would cost the industry to actually have to build, right? And today we know there's so many institutional players, so many entities, manipulating the price of Bitcoin, no different than any other asset class. But, we have to stay focused on the real solutions. And I love the fact that, cryptocurrencies are a great store of value, but it's not a solution, right? And I believe that the more, options individuals have, the more inclusive money becomes, right? So people should be able to have cash if that's what they want, stocks and bonds, right? I even joke to people, Black and Latino people, we are so conservative. If we could have everything in bonds and stocks that was conservative, that's where we would be. We have been forced into these speculative assets. Let's focus on the non-sexy solutions that actually blockchain cryptocurrency can solve, right? They're not going to be sexy or profitable, but that is the real value of this transformative space that we all love so much and that we would fight for to the death. At least I would.
And finally, what advice would you give to young people, especially young girls, particularly from underrepresented backgrounds, who are interested in pursuing careers in blockchain or the cryptocurrency space?
Oh my God. I would say that there are so many job opportunities. Don't limit yourself. First, I would say emerging technologies broadly, right? Blockchain, AI, VR, robotics, tons of job opportunities for young people, and especially women who have been resistant to innovative careers because, again, the language makes it seem, or the way it's been framed, it was not for you. So I would say look to careers in blockchain cryptocurrency. But also, I would say do your own research. I have been, struck by so many people who told me that they lost all of their Bitcoins or crypto from a scam. And I said, what was the scam? Well, somebody told me they were going to invest my crypto for me, and then it went up, and then they had my private key, and all of a sudden it's gone. And I said, and there's been a few people that I know, I said, you've known me. Have I ever told you I would buy Bitcoin for you? Haven't I always told you, here's how you can do it, right? And I even tell people who are new, stick with what you know. Cash App, PayPal, Robinhood, Venmo. You don't have to go to decentralized exchanges. Like, once you're comfortable with those, you can go deeper. So I've been struck by how many people think that they need an intermediary, right? So I would tell people the careers, even the economic opportunity, they require self-sovereignty, right? You can do your own research and find a job in crypto. You could look at the crypto native space, or you could even look at, the traditional enterprise. When you look at Fidelity digital assets that they've been building since 2014, but they also have regular Fidelity that they've gone into digital assets. There's BlackRock, there's JP Morgan, right? There's even Wells Fargo and Bank of America, regardless of what they're saying, they're building up their crypto reservoir. So one of the things I speak at HBCUs and especially business schools and majority schools, large schools, I should say. I spoke at Drexel University once, and students came to me and was just like, I'm building this, I'm building that, I'm so excited, whatever. When I go to Howard or even other HBCUs, they're just like, in their business school, they're just like, well, we hear it's a scam. Well, we're going to stay cautious. Well, I'm going to go to Goldman Sachs. Oh, I'm going to go to Morgan Stanley. That is not what the future is. Those are great jobs, and financial security is important, right? But if you're young, look to the future. Take risks, not crazy risks, right? Do your research. Do your self-sovereign research. Look at opportunities that actually will, not be costly. I know your parents are going to be like, I sent you to Howard Business School so you can go to Morgan Stanley. That's where you're going. And that's fine. If they are so adamant, if you're going to go to Morgan Stanley, at least go to their digital assets division, right? So I would say do your own research. Look at economic opportunities, somehow, some way, I blame the federal government. Black and Latino communities have gotten the message that cryptocurrency and blockchain are scams. Stay away from them. But that message was not what was delivered in wealthy white communities or even poor white communities. So we have to change the narrative. So I know I went on about my advice for young people and women, but it's really do your own research. Take calculated risks, right? Risk is not bad because in order to build wealth, in order to build generational wealth, we have to take risks. We have to invest. But we can actually do our research, make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's because the information is out there for you. And look to the helpers, right? And there are two of us on this, podcast that will be more than happy. If anyone reaches out to us, we will help you. And you can hold us accountable if we tell you, oh, go buy this cryptocurrency. We're never going to tell you that. I will tell you what's the safe options for you. But look to the helpers. There are lots of helpers across the crypto space for people who are new.
Cleve, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights with my audience. Your work in advancing blockchain education and advocating for inclusivity is truly inspiring. We appreciate your dedication to building a more equitable financial future. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Bitcoin Source. If you found today's discussion inspiring, don't forget to subscribe for more insightful conversations with leaders like Cleve. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.